All right. So welcome everyone to this round of the Indian Debating League. On the motion, this House would introduce climate change as a new subject in school curriculums. In school curricula. All right. In affirmative, we have Team Haryana. Speaking first is Ilakshi. Speaking second is Avyukt Goan. Sorry if I'm butchering your names. And speaking third will be Vidanshi Dutt or Dutt. I'm not entirely sure, I'm sorry. And for the opposition, we have the team from Maharashtra. Speaking first, Janat Kazi. Speaking second, Lachelle Rodriguez. Speaking third, Sachi Jalan. Speaking time will be 3 minutes. There will be no points of information. At 3 minutes, I will clap twice. And at 3:15, I will stop writing anything you say. So at that point, at the latest, please come to an end. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome the Prime Minister to open the case that stands in their name. Here.
And before we begin, Calix, thank you so much. But I want all the teams and all the attendees over here to realize that you truly have a debater with you when he completely takes charge. So Calix, just before we begin, I would also like to introduce you to the teams who have come in over here. And give you a flavor of what has happened so far. The fact is that we did realize that, ignited young minds have the most powerful source on earth. When they're properly directed, they have the power to bring sustained change. So 3,500 requests had come in. The students have debated over the past 1 month nearly. And you are really meeting the last and the final 2 teams over here who've reached over here. But for the group, Calix, if it's all right, I would love to sort of introduce who they are all being adjudicated by. Team, I'm sure you're delighted already to meet Calix Puker. If you attend any of his other, debates and the sessions, you'll be delighted to know that he's got an impressive list of debating achievements, including, the ESL Grand Finale, the semi-finals, the fact that he's already a judge on over 15 tournaments in Europe, from Tilbury to Maastricht to Berlin, and there are many more. He also has studied politics and economics at the University of Potsdam and a member of the Berlin Debating Union. So Calix, sorry, we had to introduce you because I'm sure the children are very excited to know who they are being talking to. Like Calix sir has already introduced the topic, so without further ado, I will push it back to the first speaker for the day today. And Calix, is it all right if we keep the time, or would you like to do that?
Oh, I've got my time already, yes.
So you are good with keeping the time for them?
Absolutely.
Right. So I'm just going to announce the sequence. Children, you know the sequence, all of you. We are obviously going 1 team at a time. So we will start with proposition, opposition, just the way we've had it always. Okay, so Ilakshi, if we are ready to go, then please get started.
Powerful connection. Education and climate change. Recent research shows if only 16% of high school students in high and middle schools of high schools means high and middle both schools income countries were to reserve climate change education. We should see a nearby 19 gigawatts.
Sorry, I cannot. I'm sorry, actually.
Of carbon dioxide.
1 moment. Sorry, could you? Actually, 1 moment.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear parts of your speech. Could you start again? The audio was very bad. So I'm sorry, I missed too much of that.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Excuse me. And start when it works for you. Right.
Okay, so can I start?
Yes.
Okay. A powerful connection. Education and climate change. Research shows that only 16% of high school students in high and middle income countries were to observe climate change education. We could see a nearby 19 gigaton reduction of carbon dioxide by 2050. When education helps students develop a strong personal connection to climate solution as well as a sense of personal agency. Consequential impact on students' daily behaviors and decision making that reduces their lifetime carbon footprint, engaging children, youth, and adults in climate solution by unleashing the creativity of teachers and students to develop and implement climate action projects in their homes, schools, and learning in grounded in decades of research on how children learn and helps build mastery of course academy contact while also catalyzing climate change. When we say that all climate solutions are needed to draw down greenhouse gases, we must also mean education solutions too. But beyond education, potential impact on reduction of carbon emissions, education, especially for girls, can save lives in the context of natural disasters exacerbated by climate change by reducing climate risk vulnerability. In a study of 125 countries, researchers found that the death toll caused by flood, drought, and the wildfires, extreme temperature events, and extreme weather events could be 60% lower by 2050 if 70% of women were able to achieve a lower secondary school education. Imagine if 100% of women were to achieve full 12 years of education. An equally important outcome of education is its potential to increase young people capacity to adapt to the harsh impacts of climate and a breadth of green skills. For example, young people need both. Okay.
All right, thank you very much. I'd now like to welcome, oh, one tiny second. Now I'd like to welcome the Leader of Opposition and to open the case for side opposition. Here.
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Yes, Janet, you may begin.
Oh, you have the timer? Okay. This house believes that climate change should not be a compulsory subject. More frequent and intense droughts, heat waves, rising sea levels, melting glaciers, and warming oceans can directly harm animals, destroy the places they live, and wreak havoc on people's livelihoods and communities. This is what climate change is. Climate change can be addressed through the use of targeting a wide cross-section of stakeholders, such as communities, industries, and government. And it is not necessary to bring an entire new subject to school, making it very expensive to add a new curriculum to all the schools in the world, when all that money could be used in other different ways to stop climate change. Climate change education should not be restricted by just a subject, but should be integrated all across the curriculum and requires emphasis on problem solving and evidence-based thinking. Climate change offers unique challenges for teachers who are finding supposed educational materials online offers little to no real information on the subject. There are materials produced by climate change doubters, lesson plans developed by the oil industry, and countless other sites with misleading or outdated information. The Climate Literacy and Energy Awareness Network, funded by federal grants, reviewed more than 30,000 free online resources and only found 700 acceptable for schools. Science teachers themselves have not had the opportunity to learn scientific content relevant to teaching climate change. And we don't need an entirely new subject, as climate change is also part of a curriculum in lots of schools, such as science. By the age of 14, the most important topic in science is climate change. We should not waste time on adding a subject during the COVID-19 situation. I say that it is not necessary for an entire new subject to be added given the current scenario. I know climate change is a very important matter, but subject is not the best way to do so. There are lots of other ways in which are better. As all of us will agree when I say that we are now living in an online world and social media platforms. We can spread the message faster through online communities and social media platforms, which is cost effective and has a larger impact on audience. Which is why I believe an entire subject is not necessary and is not even the best way. But all the other ways are way better, which my teammates will elaborate on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Exactly 3 minutes. Now I'd like to welcome the second speaker for the government to the front here.
Yes, Abdul.
Yes. Is my audio fine?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. This is the first time a global generation of children will grow up in a world made far more dangerous and uncertain as a result of changing climate and degraded environment. Addressing climate change and mitigating its impacts is imperative to protect the world's children and fulfill their rights. Without action now, climate change will exacerbate the inequalities that children already face and future generations will suffer. Climate change and environmental degradation undermine the rights of every child. This is why children are some of the most vocal and active leaders advocating for action. Children across India have been leading the way. The concepts introduced at school are centered on the need to preserve and conserve for future generations, halt resource depletion, reduce pollution, and protect wildlife, with very limited focus on greenhouse gases. Impacts of chlorofluorocarbons and other topics of immediate concern, be it the central, CBSE, ICSE, etc., or various state boards. Environmental education is limited to mere facts and figures, with very little practical value. Specific environmental problems at the national and state, city, or district levels need to be emphasized such that students will be able to understand and relate to the issues. If you are talking about plastics in our water bodies, students will grab the immediacy if their school shows you a pond in their neighborhood. Efforts to capture the complexity, interconnectedness, and various perspectives surrounding a problem, be it social, gender, economic, and ecological, will help steer students away from creating black and white scenarios of the problem, the drivers, and the solutions. This is why this house thinks that it will be a great idea to add a new subject of climate change into the curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 1 second as I take a few more notes. All right, now I'd like to welcome the second speaker for the opposition, Hear, hear.
Yes. Climate change is a reality we are all living. It's affecting our everyday lives. Let me tell you a real story. Greta Thunberg, an 18-year-old environmentalist, started her journey in 2018, where she called for a stronger action on climate change. She held a sign reading, "School Strike for Climate." Soon, other students engaged in similar protests in their own communities. Together, they organized a school climate strike movement under the name Fridays for Future, where the students skipped school classes on Friday to participate in demonstrations to demand action to prevent climate change and for the fossil fuel industry to transition to the renewable industry. The decision makers, business leaders, political leaders gave Greta Thunberg the opportunity to address the 2018 United States Climate Change Conference. She said, "This is the biggest crisis humanity has ever faced. First, we have to realize this, and then as fast as possible do something to stop the emissions and try to save what we can save." The same day, the 14th Dalai Lama wrote to the participants of the conference, "Climate change is not a concern of just one or two nations. It is an issue that affects all humanity and every living being on this earth. This is a beautiful place. This beautiful place is our only home." Climate change does not have to be taught in school only. It can be taught in other ways as well, like plays or in a workshop. Take the idea of Greta Thunberg. She did not have it as its subject in school, but still realized how serious this matter was and protested for it. Now, let's take a look at another person's view. Climate change was in the national spotlight when the New York Times magazine devoted its entire August 5th, 2018 issue to Nathaniel Rich's article, "Losing Earth, the Decade We Almost Stopped Climate Change." Rich wrote that he looked forward to the day when the young will amass the power to act on climate change. But he neglected to ask whether they will have the knowledge to do so in the light of what is and what isn't being taught in the topic now. Those were the views of two different people, yet their intention was the same. You might not know the teachers need to have extensive knowledge to design high-quality education about climate change. It is extremely difficult for all the teachers to teach the climate change because the climate changes about every minute. It's very complicated for them too. As my teammate Jannat asked you, is climate change happening? Yes. Is this a crisis? 100%. But it's my turn now. Should it be taught in schools? Yes. Now the big question, should it be a standalone subject or integrated across all subjects? That's your question to answer. But when you're answering, always be sensible, common sensible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, nearly exactly 3 minutes. 1 second. All right, now I'd like to welcome the last speaker for side government. Hear, hear.
Let me first rebut some of the points my opponents brought up. So you said that climate change is being doubted by many. And so I think my respected opponents also joined the group of uninformed and uneducated people who believe this is a hoax. An American president who I would not like to name for his own vested interest called climate change a hoax and withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement. We already have established that climate change is caused by human activities and it's a big impact on our lives and the danger is completely real. You also mentioned that why do we want to create a whole new subject out of climate change? Well, I'm 100% sure that my opponents in this house do not understand the catastrophe awaiting us and the urgency with which we must all act. It is not just a subject to be taught, but it has become a movement, a revolution to stop climate change. You also mentioned that people like Greta Thunberg must act, not the children. Well, we know why climate changes happen, and now all of us have to join hands and stop further damage and reverse the impact of climate change. So do we as children have a very important role to play in this today and in the future? Well, of course we do. Now that we've understood the impact of climate change and we need to do something about it, we must all join hands, including we the school children who also need to make a big contribution in this global effort to reverse the impact of climate change. Therefore, I would strongly recommend the introduction of climate change as an essential subject to be taught in school and in all educational institutions. Firstly, schools should teach subjects which are relevant and contemporary for today and the future. And since climate change is the most important topic affecting us, it might be taught at school as an essential subject. Secondly, there has to be a tremendous effort from everyone in creating enough awareness of how we can stop climate change and how we can reverse the impact of climate change. If the children study the subject at school, they will understand its importance and they will play their part to reduce the impact of climate change and influence others like their parents to act upon it. Thirdly, studying at school, children will become more interested in this subject and they will choose further studies and research in issues related to climate change. And therefore, it will become a big movement and every person on this planet will play their part in reversing the impact of climate change. Now, let me just conclude by saying that now that we've accepted the impact of global climate change, and therefore we must give this topic its due attention and spread awareness and influence everyone to play their part in reducing climate change and reversing the impact of climate change. So for a start, we can just introduce this as a new subject in school. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. 1 second. All right, now I'd like to welcome the last speaker for side opposition to close out this debate as a whole. Here.
Yes, sir. I repeat, it is not necessary to bring an entire subject to school. It becomes expensive too to add a new curriculum, and all that money that is being spent could be used in other ways to stop climate change. Climate change education should not be restricted by subject, but should be integrated across the curriculum. Ilakshi, you said that it is quite important, but did you know that studies have shown that climate change is integrated in the school subjects of geography, writing, art, health, science, and technology? It covers up to 3/4 of social science or science textbooks. For example, don't we study global warming in science? Introducing an entirely new subject is a huge problem for students too. Avyuk, you said that it gives quite a lot of knowledge, but it isn't student-friendly. Let me give you a practical example. You, me, all of us participating in this debate are students. We have found time to participate in this debate by many difficulties in a lot of school pressure. My term exams are going on. Adding one more subject will increase more pressure, more stress, and more work. That will take away all the free time of the student too. Additionally, we'll have one more exam. If we'd be in such a case, we wouldn't have any spare time to be here. Vedanshi, I don't think that it should be introduced as another subject. Did you know, unknowingly, we study climate change almost every day. Our parents do tell us about the climate, the situations, what is beneficial for the environment or what is not. For instance, our parents tell us about the sources that can cause global warmings and even about cyclones, hurricanes, and their effects on the environment. Just like my father told me about the heavy rains and strong winds on Andhra Pradesh due to the cyclone Gulab. Now, I'd like to reiterate the questions my teammates asked. Give me a thumbs up if you agree to it or a thumbs down if you disagree. Is climate change happening? Yes, right? Is it a crisis? Of course. Should it be taught in schools? 100%. Should it be a standalone subject or integrated across all subjects? You say it should be a standalone subject, but I say that it should be integrated across all subjects. There are other global crises. An example is lifestyle diseases, young people dying from heart attacks, children losing parents, blood pressure, diabetes, and a lot more. My big question is, does every crisis become a standalone subject in schools? No, right? Integration, the knowledge is the solution. I believe that climate change should not be taught as a different subject, but inserted in some of the subjects. It will make life easier and happier for everyone. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for a very, very interesting high-level debate. I think this one's going to be pretty close. Winning is the team from Haryana. Affirmative. All right. This is on the basis of the scores. Interestingly enough, I usually judge debates purely on the content level in university debating. And even here, it reflects exactly kind of how I saw this debate go. So why, to me, on a content level, does affirmative slightly win over opposition? I'll keep this very short, but to basically emphasize it, both teams obviously agree on climate change being an incredibly important issue that needs to be tackled. Now, opening government does a great job of showing exactly, like first in Prime Minister's speech, why it's so incredibly important. It was a little bit difficult to follow, especially because the structure could have been a bit clearer. So please, as one bit of feedback that you can take away in Prime Minister, please give me headlines so I can more easily follow your points and therefore kind of know what to listen for and where you're going in your speech. Apart from that, content-wise, it was very strong. Although one bit of feedback to you and to everyone in general, I do recommend using a bit fewer studies have said, this person has said, etc. I think you all explained very well how your examples work and why they are necessary. But here, just strike the studies have shown it, but frame it maybe as, look, leading scientists agree with this. Here is what they've said, and here is why it's true. So be a little bit careful with quoting people. Beyond that, great speech. But ultimately, government sets up a good case. We need the subject. We need to raise awareness from young generations. You very early on show why future generations are particularly care about this and need to be involved, and teachers, etc., that basically have most interest and power to ultimately change things. Now, opposition side does something quite clever here, and that is basically to come up with this idea that, look, climate change already leads into tons of other subjects that we have. We don't need it specifically as a subject on its own. You also argue that it's expensive and this money could spend better. The big criticism here is until the end of the debate, I didn't really understand how the money would be used, why will it be used that way, and how much change that would make out, like how expensive is the subject in the first place, because even if that is true, it may still make sense to have the subject as its own. As a second strand of argumentation, you also bring in that this is difficult to teach, that it's particularly difficult, but here again, it's unclear what the biggest harm of that would be. What would be the big bad thing that would happen at the point at which teachers don't effectively teach this? Would it mean that they're slightly less engaged than government would want them to be? Or why would they be worse off than in the first place, right? Even if some of it is too difficult, right? And then the third attack that I found very interesting also, and I think could have also had more weight, was students have a lot to do. This will be adding to their workload. Now the reason why government still takes it after all these attacks is that they do actually, especially in the second speech, which I found was very good also in terms of in terms of I thought the manner also was excellent, but specifically also very structured. There it's brought in that only you need a full subject to tie back to recent events and heavy weather and stuff like that. So it gave us an image of how would these classes look and why could you only do that in this form of class. I thought that was very effective and gave me a good understanding of, okay, so this is how we bring climate change closer to people by having a subject that ties it back to weather events, etc. This to me answers the question, why the subject like that? And opposition didn't really have something to apply against that. They didn't really rebuttal that point or like showed us harms or like why it wouldn't work that way. It could have helped you, by the way, this is especially for the third and second speaker on opposition, if you had then maybe explained how teaching it in different subjects raises better awareness or is like doesn't like works to make it to give us a better approach against climate change rather than having it in one subject. You could have very much combined that with, if it's in one subject, it's complicated and it's the subject that everyone hates now because it's the thing that is huge and all over the place, that this is a way that you could have maybe talked about how this actually gets kids not caring about the subject or not wanting to pay attention to it, for example. As it stands, I thought government had fantastic responses. What else would I like to highlight? I would like to highlight that in manner, the last two speeches were absolutely fantastic, especially the last speaker of the opposition. I thought manner-wise was incredibly strong. It was very engaging to listen to, was very easy to follow. It was very strategic to see where you were going with this. The biggest criticism that I've already brought here is that you didn't respond to the most important challenges from government in order to take down the team. It was beautifully structured, very good, very well mannered, but strategy-wise, you would have needed to engage with the most important parts of the speech. Whom have I not given feedback to? Oh yeah, maybe last speaker of the government. You could have, content-wise, it would have helped you maybe also to re-emphasize a bit more about why the subject itself needs to be one subject, rather than establish a bit further what a challenge climate change is, especially because both teams agreed on that. And it was just about the approach. So content-wise, please be a little bit more careful what is strategically necessary for your team, rather than how can I make a nice speech re-emphasizing this issue because your manner was very good, your structure was also easy to follow. It was a good to listen to speech, but similar as to the other speaker, strategically think a bit about what does your team need to do to stay ahead, to get ahead of the other side. 1 tiny second, let me see if there's anything more that I need to. Oh yeah, content-wise, Deputy Prime Minister, second speaker of the government, I thought that was really strong. I thought that was necessary. That was the key part of the debate to kind of flesh out why the subject is needed. Apart from that, what else can I say? Very strong opening, I thought. It was very, very good and clear thesis to where your speech was going to go. Yeah, one thing I would have liked you to get maybe into a little bit deeper was in your second point where you talked about how basically right now the way we teach it keeps kids away from nuance so that they don't really understand the issue, because you kind of left it a bit in the room of what's the problem when people don't really understand climate change but still want to act about it. Like that could have been a bit interesting to go a little bit deeper in here. There you kind of left it a little bit short by saying they will lack the nuance to talk about this. What does that mean for us? So just impact that a little bit. And Deputy Leader of Opposition, I think I already said everything, but yeah, mostly again, try to establish why it's bad actively to have it in one subject a bit more deeper. Here would make sense wherever you spoke about and you use a lot of time in the beginning. I thought the story about Greta Thunberg was very good, was very interesting. I think you could have used that a bit more effectively by showing why this is the way to critique the system rather than needing to teach them about it first. So why can't they, for instance, one, go on strike and do these kind of activist things while at the same time learning from it? Why would it be better this way? That's my main criticism of that speech. But beyond that, also, again, engaging listener, I thought this was a very high-level debate.
Thank you so much,
I hope I didn't take
Alex.
too much time.
No. Thank you, Alex. I'm sure the teams are delighted hearing your speeches. So a quick round of applause for both the teams for putting up a great show, and to Team Haryana, who clearly I thought in some way was the underdog. But when I see the scores, they were so close. They were so close. I mean, all of you are very capable, and we wish you the best for the journey ahead. With that, Alex, is it all right if I please declare the best speaker for the category?
Yes, go ahead.
4 to 6. This is
a close race this time.
Yes, it was a very close race, and I'm sure these are all moments of learning for all of you. but we have been watching all of you literally grow in front of our eyes. And our best speaker is based out of the performance that we've seen in the semi-finals and the finals cumulatively. And that's just a quick recognition of the hard work, of the appreciation and the